Welcome everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to break your scenery. So if like me you've got far too many crates, there's never too many crates. What I'm saying is you've got a few crates. Shipping containers like this, for example. So this is obviously for Warhammer 40k, but I'm using it a lot in Necromunda. You can probably guess that by the amount of Necromunda videos I've been doing over the past year. Now, these are great containers. You can make stacks of them, hollow them out, make them into habs, you can make them into other things. But if you just want to keep them as containers, how do you keep them interesting? Yes, you can paint them in several different ways, but to keep them as a container shape, a pretty much solid shape, so you haven't taken out the ends to make it into a walkway or anything in your game, just to make it a bit more interesting. Yeah, paint them up. Hell, you can even put Carl Johnson's Necromunda posters all over them, lots of propaganda or wanted posters, and those are flipping amazing. Don't get me wrong, the guy's a god. But rust effects are also good for breaking it up, making it look more realistic. A little bit of dirt, as you can see there. But I'm going to go just a little bit further, and I've got myself a battery drill. So I'm not talking about a big mains drill and completely destroy your terrain and then probably slip and get your hand. And in this video, if you have a vice, it is quite useful. But I have a what they call progressive battery drill. So I'm not going to go flat out. I can let go of the trigger any time. It's not mains driven. I'm going to be fairly safe, so I'm just going to hold this drill and this container. Not going to put it in a vice. But if you are quite young or unsure, please get an adult help you. So rust effects look wicked. But what happens if it's really rusty? So rusty, the corrosion's starting to eat through. And what I do for this is, I have a couple different size drill bits, so they're not too uniform. So one there, maybe one there. And then I break it up a little bit by using a smaller drill bit. Like so. So that one is a couple of mil, I would say, probably about 3 mil, but just mix it up a little bit. Swapping it out now. As you can see, I'm making a right old mess. So always have some newspaper down, or in my case, I have a messy hobby area that I can easily sweep with this cutting mat. And just have a couple of different sized holes nearby. Just like that, and make it nice and random and pretty messed up. So make sure the holes aren't too neat, so you can do a little bit of angles as well, and some major holes, so it looks a bit more rust eaten. Now you can also do this on your wooden pieces of terrain. So in Necromunda, I always like to think there is no wood in Necromunda, but don't let that limit you at all. If you want your underhive to have trees and fauna, please do. Please don't let me stop you or give you any suggestions on what your personal hive looks like. That's my preference. And you can also use the same kind of technique for woodworm on planks and things like that. For maybe you've got Lord of the Rings or something. You've got a nice Goblin King layout for the Hobbit, and those wooden planks need some woodworm, right? It can't be too neat. Or your Mordheim, it'd be fantastic to make a Mordheim board one day. Or even Warcry, a nice couple of rotten planks in a Warcry set would be phenomenal. So I'm just going to do a couple of holes at the end as well, and then I'm going to get some bigger drill bits on the go again, mess it up, don't make it look too neat, and put more rust effects on there to really show you how it looks pretty beaten. Now, the usual spots for corrosion would be around hinges and things like that, maybe lower down, but mainly where water traps and collects, or on the edges of containers where it's more likely to get beaten, the edges smacked about. So that's fairly light in comparison to some corrosion I have done. How you could even destroy pretty much a whole side of a container. And if you really want, rather than keeping the container as a solid piece, you can have so many holes in it, your troops and miniatures could see through to the other side. So I'll put a few more holes in this, I'll put some rust effects on there and show you what I've done so far, and then I'll show you another piece of terrain that I'm about to break. Now, for quick rust effects, I have used Craig and Rose's in the past, and I've done a video on it, which is great for massive boards and things like that. But it does take a bit of time to go off, so if you need some quick rust effects in a small area, you could always paint it yourself. But recently I have been trying some of this. So Tabletop War James always spoke very highly of this, so I thought I would get some. In fact, even better than getting some myself, I got some for a birthday present. So my other half actually bought me some rust effects. Yeah, that's a way to a man's heart. Rust effects. So one of my 40th birthday presents. I know what you're thinking. This guy looks like he's in his 20s, but no, I assure you, I am 40. And that was one of my presents. And quickly, literally dab it on the surface with an old paintbrush. So not a fancy paintbrush in the slightest, dead old brush. Just dab it in there, and I've literally just done it just before I set the camera off. In 2 minutes, literally 2 minutes before that, I did the one on the top just to show you the difference. So probably right in front of your very eyes, this stuff will start drying. Just make sure you give it a damn good shake. So you can see I've put some on there. I think that was the first one, then it was that one. Work my way around there, looking lovely. So probably right before your very eyes, that will start to go rusty in a second. I will lower the camera down to give you a better view of this in a minute. It's a nice shaky bit of camera work here a second. And as I'm gassing, this will start drying. So with dirty down rust, it is water soluble, so if you have made a mistake, you can always reactivate this stuff with a bit of water. You can also thin it out with a bit of water, so it's real good stuff. But I gave the bottle a damn good shake, and I literally just applied it neat from the bottle. So apparently, according to this, it does cure in a matter of minutes, so up to 5 minutes before it's fully cured. Which is pretty good. So if I didn't like that, I could always add a bit of water, reactivate it, maybe even thin it down, but this is heavy rust because it's completely eaten through a container. It's got to be fairly heavy rust. Or I suppose it could be bullet holes. Someone really wanted to get into that container, started shooting in a confined space to try to bust it open. But yeah, really happy with the effects, and nothing beats different mediums, different effects on a piece of terrain to really make it look more realistic. So yes, you could paint rust, you could even paint a hole in the side of it, but you can go completely to town, really destroy this piece of terrain, not just make the odd subtle hole in it like that. I have got loads of these containers. I've probably got 20 containers, and I think I will start destroying them. Get a few ambots inside, tearing them open from the inside out and whatnot. But like I said before, I have used them on several pieces of terrain, especially Necromunda terrain. I've done a like a hunter's hideaway before, with shipping containers stacking on top of each other. So easy to make a piece of terrain with these, and they have fantastic detail inside and out. Right, the next piece. What am I going to destroy next? Say destroy, that actually is controlled destruction. I really could have gone to town and destroyed big patches of this. I think I might in the next one. Right, the next piece of terrain I'm going to destroy is the simple Zone Mortalis column. So I am going to destroy this piece, but I also need it to be able to flip the top so I can put different layers on this, because I don't want a complete individual piece on its own. I like my terrain modular so I can stack it and reuse it. Put the different top on it as well. And I know full well if I destroy too much of the base and I do stick things inside, it may not slot onto the Zone Mortalis tile, because it needs to be slightly recessed whatever you put inside. So bear that in mind. What I'm going to do is cut out a large chunk, destroy the edges, stick some debris inside, and put some crystals inside. The reason I'm going to do that is I want a nice stark contrast between the darkness inside this destroyed column and some weird glowing crystals. Now I thought glowing crystals would be pretty cool, or fungus. You can have glowing fungus, that seems very Necromunda. But the reason I went with crystals, basically to add a little bit more crazy colour. And we used to have crystals in our very own game of Outlands. So Outlands we made a few years before Necromunda was re-released, because we didn't think Necromunda was ever going to come back the way it did. And it's very similar to like Firefly / Borderlands, if you've ever played that. And we used to have crystals as currency. Spice crystals we used to call it, obviously before Doom was remade as well. So I'm going to destroy one and put some fungus in there and put some crystals in there. So normal painted outside, dark on the inside, and then the stark bright glowingness of the fungus. Fungus probably would be luminescent in Necromunda, because why not be weird and wonderful, right? So for my next dangerous tool to probably lop off a hand, it's not a drill this time, it's the good old trusty hobby saw. So the only reason I'm using that over a drill, rather than completely destroying this part of the terrain and never to be seen again and making a hell of a mess, I'm going to cut out the majority of it with the saw, because I want to keep the bit I cut off, because I'm tight and I believe in rule number 1 on the hobby: never truck anything away. So I'm going to keep the chunk I take out, and I could always use it in, I don't know, something like the ash waste or something like that, as a destroyed piece of terrain. So I'm going to cut myself out a nice little triangle, do it off camera, and come back to you. So that's the piece I've cut out, and I'm going to put that in my terrain bix box for Necromunda. Put the hobby saw away so I don't lose any limbs. And going back to the old drill again, I do have some bits that would be pretty useful. Something like that, that would agitate the surfaces. It's always nice so it doesn't look so clean. So clean cut, that's my personal preference. If you feel like there is a laser cutting tool or something in Necromunda or whatever terrain system you're on, and that's happened to, that's great. But for me, I'm going to really mess up the edges. So you could always use the drill bit again if you want to, but I'm going to attack it with this piece. By all means, you could always use standing knife or something, so it doesn't look too uniform, but I just find it's more speedier like this. So rather than shaking the camera and making a horrible noise, I'll do this off camera and show you what I've done. So after I've roughed up the edges, messed it up a little bit, it looks a little bit more realistic, a bit like it's blown up. Of course, after I paint this thing, I will make the edges look a lot darker, like smoke and flame have come out at some stage in the past. So next, what I'm going to do to keep the cost down is get a bit of cardboard from your favourite miniatures game and basically shove it in there at a bit of an angle. Doesn't have to be neat. And when you glue it in place, Make sure it's a little bit wonky, bit at a slope. You don't want it flat and perfectly level, it would look too obvious. So I'm going to stick it somewhat like that. And then I'll start putting some busted sprue, pieces of cork in there. Start gluing it, filling in the gaps, and making it look a little bit more realistic. Like some of the debris been blown in and stuff's grown in there over the years. So I'll glue that in place, and then I'll start with some sprue, little bits of sprue, and chunks of cork in there. So what I did was stick, like I said, a couple of pieces of cork in there, and the rest is sprue mix. So what's sprue mix? Basically, it's sprue. Shocker, right? No one saw that coming. So all I do is cut off tiny little chunks of sprue, like so. Keep my hand over the top so it doesn't go flying, but rinse and repeat. So I have seen a few people use old mincemeat grinders and just chuck some sprue in the past to save a lot of time. This stuff basically is rubble, but weight saving. So normally you would use actual stones, but obviously after a while it becomes quite heavy, especially in a small concentrated piece like this. A lot of stones just to cover that surface area of cardboard would get really heavy. So rinse and repeat, a load of bits of this. So of course you could use sand, you could even use styrofoam or insulation foam, but this stuff is brilliant. It really looks more like rubble. Just random chunks. So after gluing a bit of sand in there as well, just give it some different size textures, that's pretty much what you're going to get. So this is when you want to start to add either your mould, fungusy kind of things, or your crystals. So to make crystals, literally all I'm making it from is sprue. So slightly angled pieces of sprue, like so. Of course you can buy clear plastic rods and angle them as well, or you can actually buy fluorescent crystals. If you're going to buy the fluorescent crystals, make sure you paint the whole thing, then add the crystals afterwards. But as I want these things to be glowing, I'm going to make my own, plus I'm tight. You know, making it from household materials, I have got oodles of sprue. So I'm going to stick some sprue clumps in there to make it look like crystals. And then for the mode, all I've got is, you can either use loads of beads, a fair size one so you can actually see it, or some little balls of green stuff. So what I generally do is, if I have a load of green stuff, one's on the road, run there, and I've got a little bit left over, rather than chucking it away, you can put it in the freezer and use it for another day, or you can make little bricks, sandbags, little balls, so you can use it for fungus or whatever in the future. I'll even make little pumpkins as well. So for moonstone bases, make little pumpkins. Yeah, green stuff will keep, obviously, if you put it in the freezer, wrap it up in cling film, things like that. It's pretty hardy stuff. So I'm going to start sticking a few of those in there as well, make a nice little clump of phosphorus fungus. Easy for me to say. So firstly, a rattle can or a decent primer with an airbrush really seal all the sand and the sprue, whatever you want to use in there. Seals it quite nicely, as well as obviously super glue dropped in there. With sand will disperse really nice and evenly, sealing everything. Don't forget your recess on the bottom, so your terrain will lock together correctly, like so, and same on the top. So it should go that way around quite nicely. And obviously you can put your thumb through there, knock that out. And should be able to sit in there as well. So that's why I didn't cut it too close to the edges, there and there. And the plastic or the cardboard, whatever you want to use in there, doesn't get too close to the edge either. So whatever colour you decided to paint your columns, that's totally up to you. I'm doing my colour scheme, which reminds me of the 90s cardboard necromunda terrain. So remember to paint your top as well, so it fits nicely in there. And when it's nice and dark and grubby, do a bit of object source lighting or whatever you want glowing in the dark. So thin your paints a little bit with the airbrush is always helpful, especially inks and things like that. Going over these things will really make it pop. So less is always more when something is glowing. But yeah, that's just my normal grubby looking pillar. And I've obviously blasted a darker colour around the entrance where that's been destroyed. So once the lid is on and everything's painted up inside, that should really, really, really pop in the darkness. Right, so I'm going to get my fancy bright colours. I do all my funguses the same, or fungi the same, sorry, I apologise. And that's just a fluorescent green. I think I might pick a pinky purple for the crystals. So there you have it, how to destroy your terrain, or possibly make it better. So you can see in there, it's supposed to be really, really dark. And then you get your glowing fungus. See if I can get the light in a better place, or just turn it off altogether. And then you can see the crystals in there. So it's supposed to be dark. It's supposed to be phosphorescent, luminous. Just something a bit different for your necromunda terrain, your 40k terrain, any sci-fi terrain. You can blast it open and put weird and wonderful crystals. You can do it to your fantasy terrain. There is no end. The only limitation is your brain. So for me, fairly limited. And same with the holes. You don't have to drill the holes in metal containers. You can, like I said, put woodworm and metal if you so wish with tiny drill bits. But there you go. Just mix it up a little bit. I have hundreds and hundreds of these, and I have probably about, God knows how many of those. So don't make it too uniform. I mean, especially for necromunda, it's supposed to be grim dark. You can't imagine rust would be a uniform pattern every time. So just mix up a little bit, make something of interest, and there you go. How to destroy your terrain. Hope you're keeping safe and well, everybody, and please let me know on our Facebook page or in the comment section below what hobby things you've been up to recently. I would really like to hear from you guys. Stay safe, you wonderful people.